it kind of feels low-key kind of like a check-in, like, hey, do you still like fan service? Yes, I still do. Every time, Booba is great, but when it comes down to it though, it feels like also the topic of how we go about it sometimes changes in ways of like what perspective can we look at today and all that other stuff. And really, it's been on my brain a lot because I keep seeing people, you know, kind of go out their way with different takes, especially when it comes down to games and obviously anime and things like that, and just be like, oh, Veresa, yeah, we don't care for that. We should bully the people that has Veresa because there's no reason why you should have a character that looks like that and all that type of stuff when it comes down to it. Or literally, oh, Fire Force came back and the first couple of seconds Tamaki gets naked, how original, and all that sort of stuff. And immediately as I see that, I just immediately am annoyed, mainly due to the fact that people literally was not like this years ago. Back in the 90s, back in the early 2000s, if you wanted somebody, you go after somebody. That's just ultimately how it was, right? Nowadays, you can't necessarily do that. And valid reason as to why, because people are hella afraid, and it's mainly men are hella afraid to go out their way to go ahead and try to chase after, you know, somebody that's pretty damn good, or maybe someone that might be, you know, they can have for their lives and whatever. And ultimately they just don't do it anymore, mainly because you don't know what's going to be, you know, outside of the bread pocket, what's going to be coming through in a different way, in terms of like, oh, is they gonna actually want to, you know, be in a relationship, or is this gonna be some nonsense and then I breathe wrong and, for example, the ops is on me immediately? And that's just how it is, right? And that's why you don't get people to kind of see by dating anymore and stuff like that, right? There's plenty of real world issues where this has caused a lot of nonsense, the Me Too movement especially. And just to clarify, I don't hate the idea what it is with, you know, obviously trying to end things like sexual harassment and abuse and things like that in the real world. That's perfectly fine. But then when you really see it put into practice, it gets very shitty. Like, it's only meant for women at times. And then, you know, if it's a guy that goes through it, just be a man and deal with it and all that type of stuff. And pretty much, once you really see it put into practice, that's how it starts to affect, you know, our games and our anime and things of sort of like that in the realm of fiction. That's why things like Senran Kagura doesn't really exist anymore. That's why things like of Japanese games get hella censored or changed up so damn much. That's why something like Sweet Baby Inc. pretty much exists when it comes down to it, if we're gonna be honest. Like, a lot of that shit is attached to that one movement and how much that shit has been abused over the years and why it's been so negatively received as of late and just as of some years going by. And then the pandemic obviously did not make anything really better, because now you just basically lost everybody with those ideals in a room, and essentially the only place they can spin those ideals at is on the internet. And that's how the anime community turned into the giant heap of a mess, even more of a mess than it already is now. That's why the gaming industry is basically a damn mess as it is now when it comes to certain ideas, because certain ideas gets absolutely thrown in there and then just get shunned because of fan service, or, you know, because they want to express a character a bit more femininely and more sexually and all that sort of stuff, and that gets shut down. But then that's when you get shittier projects like a Concord or a South of Midnight or things sort of like that, and then people be like, oh, it's the greatest thing of all time, only for that to get shut down because people know what that shit is. They know what the underlying agenda is, right? I've seen tons of people say like, oh, South of Midnight is my culture, my representation, strong women. Why does no one buy the game? Because we know what this shit is. We very much understand this. We've seen the industry take a turn for the worse, and we don't want to put our money to that, especially like $70 games now going to $80 games potentially. We don't want to put our money to these things that we're not going to sit here and enjoy. And we immediately already know there's some underlying messages and how it's, you know, basically the agenda and points of the game. And you can easily say, well, there's agendas in other games. Sure, you could say that, but it's depending on how it is done, right? Because if the game ain't done very well, and obviously there's like a hella big focus on certain things that really has nothing to do with anything, people ain't gonna sit here and care. People could definitely sit here and say, oh, Final Fantasy VII always focus on, industrialism and, things of the sort where it's like, the government having too much damn power. And yes, it does focus on that, but that's not, even though it is a giant focus, it's not feeling like it's the overall aspect of the game. It doesn't feel like that is the only plot point that we have to focus on as its entirety, right? It just feels like a small subsection of things. Plus, it's so well done that it's not really something that we gotta really care that hard about, or care that much when it comes down to it, until the plot point represents itself in Shinra or whatever they decide to do with it. Most of the time, as a casual person, you're probably going to really focus on stopping Sephiroth, if anything. And then if you're really thinking about it, then yes, it is more about that whole governmental power thing or whatever. Because it's like, well, Sephiroth is a whole project of Shinra, so yeah, that also leads one into a whole nother thing. So yes, it does. But realistically though, are you genuinely thinking about that when you're playing these games? Not necessarily, and you're probably not really thinking about it. You're probably just enjoying the story for what it is. The things I've noticed when it comes down to what projects actually be very successful is like the ones that are showing subtlety in terms of what their story is or things that they try to do, or games that are just straight up unapologetically doing something that is very much the opposite of what other games do, or trying to be, I guess like different or something like that. And that's something that I think also works as well, right? One of the big reasons as to why I wanted to make this video too is off the negative comments I've seen out of the No Mercy video that we did not too long ago, and a lot of people very much cannot listen for whatever reason. Their ears don't work because a lot of people came there with negative comments and just being in the weirdest ass way of saying like, oh yeah, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, or things sort of like that. And while I don't focus on negative comments because I genuinely do not care, I'm not taking back anything I said in terms of that video. My point of that video was, yo, this game is very much not for everybody. It is definitely having some things in there that's pretty much crazy in context of what's going on. That being said, do I think something like this should be banned or should be taken down? Absolutely not. Because at the end of the day, this is just something that is fiction. It's not anything real. It's not promoting to do anything in real life as edgy as the game tries to be. And to be honest, the game looks mad boring. I looked at the scenes and I promise you, it's not nearly as bad as people make it out to be. But when it comes down to it though, it's not necessarily anybody's cup of tea. That's perfectly fine. And if you don't want to play it, that's also perfectly fine. Again, the best way to make sure games like this, if that's what you don't like, and if you really want to make sure these games don't succeed, then don't pay them anything. Don't pay your money to things like this if that's how it is. Hell, you should be taking notes from people that actually does that with games like a Concord or a South of Midnight or a Star Wars Outlaws or whatever exists out there, because yeah, you have games like that exist that no one genuinely cares for because they're bad or they're not necessarily up to standard as to what they should be, and then they fail, and then they say, and the company's like, okay, we won't make that shit anymore. Forspoken is a very good example of that. A game that no one really sat here and cared for because we kind of already knew what this shit was, but at the end of the day, Square's not gonna make another Forspoken because they already know, okay, this didn't really work out. Let's focus on the things that actually does work. Let's go ahead and focus on Final Fantasy or Kingdom Hearts, wherever the hell that game is right now, and Dragon Quest, and again, Super, wherever the hell that game is right now, and all that sort of stuff. That's why I'm happy as hell why when they had got rid of Sweet Baby Inc. out of their games and out of their company, because yeah, they don't really need them. They do not need them whatsoever. And then once you realize, hey, we can put out games that we genuinely care about and want to do it in the ways that we genuinely know will work. And once you start focusing on that aspect of things, holy shit, money comes down out of nowhere for these sales of these games, and it works out perfectly fine. And you can apply this to fan service as well. There is so many people, especially on TikTok, and TikTok's the worst offender of this, where they have literally people at the wazoo, men, women, don't matter. All of them basically just be like, fan service is bad to some degree because of X reason. I don't know, let's just say Fire Force, for example. Which, I'm gonna be honest, fan service is amazing when you don't have a bitch in your ear trying to yell at you talking about it's bad. Because I'm gonna keep it very much a stack. For something like Fire Force, pretty much isn't ashamed of what it is, and it clearly shows. And when we get to a certain part in the future, that if you haven't read that in the manga, I'm not gonna spoil it, but when you see what Tamaki does in the future, oh boy, I really hope that puts people on effing blast, because deadass, it is so annoying. That is part of the reason why shit like that is, you know, shit like this is the way it is right now, because no one actually follows through on, you know, things of thinking, oh, it's like you can have someone being mad sexy over here looking mad fine. It's nothing bad to say, oh shit, that girl got a fat ass and she looked mad fine. There's nothing crazy about saying something like that. It's only crazy when you start trying to force your way into that and then try to basically be like, all right, I see she has a fat ass, time to get my hands on that. And then you actually start doing something like that, and then it's like, it's a problem, because yeah, duh, that's like a huge red flag. Like I said before, there is levels of maturity that is out there, and definitely it's not just over, you know, when people indulge in something, it's not just about the age of a person, it's also about the mental maturity about how they go about certain things, right? And when it comes down to it, ultimately a lot of these woke ideas or these things that, you know, be promoted that no one really cares about is stuff that we already know. It is just common sense, but just throwing it to a higher sense of like, oh, urgency, or it's a duty or something like that, when we know. And then there's other things that just get added to it that's just extremely dumb for no reason. Like, for example, I'll be honest, when people always come through with the idea of like, oh, you must ask for consent, consent is key, consent is that, I'm not gonna lie, I want to hit a guy with a baseball bat, because I'm just like, yes, we know consent is mad important. You don't do shit without that, first of all. When it comes down to it, you don't. Do I need to beat your ass with a lawn blower? Like, I'm not gonna lie, you're kind of annoying the shit out of me, because I know already. I know, and majority of people should already know that consent is key when it comes down to doing literally anything. And the fact that people have to beat your ass over the head with it multiple times is kind of freaking annoying. I'm not gonna sit here and lie, right? The only people that you need to express this towards is people that literally don't know what that means, or people that literally is just terrible at listening and don't have any type of comprehension skills. That's the type of people that you should be beating that shit over with. Like, I don't need to necessarily see like a whole bunch of people just beating your ass over a common sense thing that people already should know what that is from childhood. And that's not where that train ended up stopping at either, because tons of people be like, oh, you should respect, you know, people that are different from you, people that are like trans or, you know, gay or whatever. And I'm like, yes, duh, you should, right? But again, keep that to people that are basically not necessarily knowing what the hell is going on when it comes down to it, right? Because I'm not gonna sit here and lie, pretty much anyone with a brain should know not to harass people because they are that, and that is the choice that they ultimately end up making. You shouldn't, obviously. That's like duh. That's like the first couple things you should learn in life, not to necessarily judge other people because they look different or whatever. No effing shit. But then you got a ton of people that just do not understand that for whatever reason, and it's weird all the damn time. The same thing we can talk about culture, but then when it comes down to the culture, a lot of people don't respect anything that Japan has because they're all assholes for half the time. And then when people want to talk about, hey, maybe you should leave Japan alone, like stop being so nuisance over there, like being nuisance streamers or jumping on sakura trees to try to do pull-ups or whatever, or trying to just harass people over there or whatever. And essentially people get mad at you for that because you call them out on their bull. But it's like, how can you say you're progressive and all that type of stuff when ultimately you don't do the progressive things outside of your own damn circle? It's so weird. I know I'm going off topic, but all this shit kind of adds up. I'm not gonna sit here and lie. And then going back to fan service real quick, people oftentimes be like, oh, if fan service be done, it has to make sense. It has to be a story thing. It just has to. It doesn't have to. Sometimes it can just exist to be there just because it is there. right? Because a lot of the damn time when I'm watching a show or just watching anime in general, there's a lot of fan service that just happens out of the blue in certain shows that really doesn't necessarily need to be there, right? I can argue too and agree. Fire Force don't need Tamaki to have just to be, busting out of her clothes all the damn time. That being said, am I mad that she's doing it and that the creative decision decided to do it? No, not at all. Mainly because for me personally, when it comes to Fire Force, it makes it a bit unique. And plus, when you see her on screen, you know something potentially crazy is about to go down. Literally, look at the last episode. You have one moment where Tamaki basically just landed on Arthur's face. That is the only little slight jab at fan service that you really got. And it's not even really fan service. She just kind of slipped, if I'm being honest. But granted, would I want Tamaki's ass on my face? Absolutely. But when it comes down to it though, when you look at that one moment, that's the only thing that happened. And then when you look at literally anything else, because Tamaki was not present, look at all the serious stuff that happened. Look at all the normal conversations that was going down. Look at the whole talk between Shinra and Joker. They were not necessarily having anything dumb happen during that time. They were literally moving the plot forward. You could tell that, yes, when Tamaki's on screen, that's when stupid shit happens. And it's fun if you engage with that and you enjoy it. And it might not be fun for another person if that's not what they enjoy. It's ultimately, it is what it is. And if you don't like Fire Force because of Tamaki, then stop watching the show. There is no reason for you to be bitching at the show because you can't mentally process or handle the fact that a character got butt booty naked for whatever reason because the creative decision decided to let it be. Then look at something like, again, Veresa when it comes down to Genshin. People have complained hard as hell about Veresa's design and essentially everything that she basically is in her movements and all that sort of stuff. She hits people with her butt. What? That's outrageous. That's insane. You can't do that. She has a mini skirt. What? You can't do that. That's outrageous. She's a cowgirl. How dare they do that? That's outrageous. But then you get someone like Cancerella from Wuwa, and literally no one complains. People literally get mad because she had a whole camel toe, and now they censored it. How dare they? And all that sort of stuff. And when it comes down to it, people don't complain about that. I don't see big content creators in those gacha spaces complain about that shit or, yap about it at all. And what? It's because the character is more mature. Same, but different. That doesn't matter much to me. If you complain about someone like Veresa, why aren't you complaining about someone like Cancerella? I'm gonna be honest. It feels a bit strange, and it's definitely something that I just don't really see how you don't look hypocritical about, honestly. I don't. It just, again, it's always been this weird ass thing. It always been. And granted, here's the crazy part. Veresa's design doesn't even be that crazy. It's not even that damn crazy compared to someone like, I guess, even in the same universe, I don't know, Mawika or something like that, where you can see there's prime jiggles and prime features that make her look good in every angle pretty much when it comes down to it, right? It's just a bit weird how people go about this sort of stuff. It just is. And they want to call out one thing but then not call out the other thing because shenanigans, I suppose. And to kind of add another thing to this, I'm not saying that every piece of fiction needs to have fan service in it. I don't really think it's needed in every little thing because I think that's crazy to say that fan service needs to exist for every little thing. Plus, if you want to see fan service that damn bad, just look up Rule 34, deadass. That is how it is. But when it comes down to it though, not everything needs to absolutely have it because it's not fit for everything. Hell, I can even argue that sometimes fan service can be overbearing when it comes down to certain things. That being said, do I think it's just absolutely the pinnacle of just all trashness? No. Do I even think it ruins a show? If I'm being honest, not really. I've seen so many people shit on the one fight in Fire Force where you had that guy that goes, "My stars!" versus Shinra all the time. And the reason why that fight is ruined for a lot of people is because Tamaki is just there and she just, it's just in the way for a lot of people. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't view that as bad right? In fact, I'd argue that's one of my favorite moments in Fire Force, right? Not the fan service itself, but the fight itself as a whole along with it. And the reason for that is because, well, Tamaki thought this guy was a decent person, ultimately to be wrong. And then as of a result of that, she just, yes, in the way, because that's kind of her whole point. And then at the very same time, it kind of brings a sense of vulnerability of what has happened because of her being, trusting as well. And she just there, unfortunately, kind of has to deal with it while her lecture is kind of going off, So ultimately, it kind of comes off as just Tamaki being very much vulnerable in that situation and not being able to do anything to help the situation, and ultimately just because of her being too damn trusting, essentially you could say that that's the reason why a lot of the shit that happened in that fight happened for the reason. Honestly, I didn't really take that fight that damn seriously, that damn hard, because if I'm being honest, especially in the English dub, the man punched Shinra and yelled "my stars" at the same time. I'm not gonna lie, that shit is the funniest thing, and it took me out the fight way more than, Tamaki just looking all mad, cute, and vulnerable. Like, I'm not gonna lie, that's the part that took me out, if anything. Also, I do want to add one more thing. When it comes down to people talking about fan service and, having opinion about it too, a lot of times you get people that do talk about it that are valid in their justification, what they like, essentially. But at the very same time, it's the people that I feel like that gets taken advantage of, especially in people when they interview them at cons or something like that too, because it's just like, oh, why do you think that? And then they just genuinely like the shit, but in the interview it's just like, this bitch boy here, how dare he like something like that? That's a crazy take to say in this time and day and age. It's a different time, whoa, wokeism, all that stuff. And it's just so annoying. It genuinely is. Like, I deadass do not understand why there is such a damn hate boner for fan service to a high-end degree. Actually, I do understand it. It's a lot of shit that genuinely the anime space was not ready for, and it's mainly due to a lot of real-world shit that really infected a lot of spaces in fiction and in the industries that we all like, in a lot of ways that it didn't need to be there. I'm just gonna be absolutely honest. Like, again, games like something like No Mercy, or anime like a Fire Force, or things of sort like that should not necessarily be taken down, even if you don't like the product yourself, right? I'm just gonna be absolutely real. And then you can't sit here and say, well, what about, there ain't no double standard, because there absolutely is. There's plenty of times where the guy does something really sus and people obviously, or at least other guys, don't really care for that, but women will rage about it all the effing time. Much less two women start kissing. Oh shit, that's the most empowering thing I've ever seen in life, and it's amazing. But this moment you see a guy and a girl come through, it is the most offensive thing on the planet, and you don't understand why. It just is very dumb, right? It just ultimately is. The only thing I can suggest as a solution when it comes down to it is just to straight up be unapologetic with it. If you're going to like fan service, just be unapologetic and just like it for what it is. You don't have to be overbearing, you don't have to be over the top with it, but just continue to like it if that's what the thing you like. Also, I was watching another content creator, Dr. Disaster, and essentially, I can't speak today, but essentially, when it comes down to it, he had a very good notion in a lot of the beginning of his videos, where he talking about, these sort of games that get pushed out that no one really cares for, and he basically was like, yo, we already are just showing that we don't really like a lot of games like, again, Star Wars Outlaws, or South of Midnight, or things of sort like that, that obviously push a certain agenda and things like that. So we don't need to support these games. However, we need to provide alternatives. We need to show off that there is stuff that, we can produce out there that people is going to like. So we can't just sit here and just, take away things that we don't like. We need to have a solution and an alternative of things that people do like. That's part of the reason why I very much like doing my own damn story at times on this channel, because it's just like, well, there's nothing really like it out there, at least in my mind, in my eyes. So at the end of the day, I'm really just going to continue to keep writing that story and just enjoying what it is for me personally, because it is unapologetic as to what it is. It's perfectly fine for what it is. right? And even if it's a story that you don't like, it's something that I do, and hopefully other people will do in time as well. And that's just ultimately what it is. You got to provide a solution for other people. We can take away shit all the time, but if you're not adding anything to it where people can find some enjoyment into it, then it's kind of like a losing situation all across the board. I do also believe, and I'll add this as the last thing because I've been yapping for a good 25 minutes, but when it comes down to it, I do feel like another thing as to why people hate fan service so much, especially around certain characters and certain ages of characters, is, or at least the way characters look, is mainly because a lot of the world is very different from Japan. Like, a lot of people would look at Japan and see a lot of the stuff that's being produced, and if they were in our culture, we would pretty much axe it down, even though a lot of us also hate it, but still they would axe it down because that's just ultimately how other people are. Not in Japan though, because you have like regular, adult magazines right by something like Shonen Jump in a store, or you get something right by like some kids books in a store. That is ultimately how those things in that culture of Japan just simply work. That is just how it is, right? So things like a High School DxD is for teenagers over there, while something like that for over here is for mature audiences that's like maybe 18 years old or 21 years old and stuff like that. And that's just how the different culture kind of is. You don't have to sit here and agree with it, but ultimately you should also recognize that's just how the culture is, right? People a lot of the time, especially when it comes to creative decisions in anime and games and such like that, they don't really give a shit about, oh, if a lolly character looks sexy as shit, or if they decide to make a teen character looks fine as hell, or anything like that. While a lot of anime is basically based in high school a lot of the damn time, and just focus on the sex appeal of those type of characters and, those different ranges. It's because of the culture is being different. The culture is definitely a huge part of what makes anime what it is. And if you decide to just rip that away, then you don't really got much left of it. It's not really anything that's worth preserving, if I'm going to be honest. So I think that's also another factor that kind of needs to be thought about too. It's just the fact that, we live worlds apart, different cultures, different ideas. And when it comes down to it, certain ideas doesn't really translate to a lot of other people than other ideas do. And again, I can only assume the reason why people are so uppity about it is because of how just overall people has changed over the course of time. Whether it's the Me Too movement, whether it's literally the pandemic and just the craziness that came from that, and it did something to our brains just being locked up in our rooms all the time, which is no big problem for me because I'm usually locked up in my room just all the damn time. But when it comes down to it though, there has been a change, right? Again, this ain't the 90s and the 2000s anymore, but damn, does it make me wish we still had those times. People in those times had brains to not necessarily just be having all this going on for 5,000 years. Because again, common sense things, we know it doesn't need to be amplified. We know how things should work. We know that, if you want to go after somebody and start a relationship, you should be able to. And ultimately now people can't do that because people are too afraid, and it's not surprising as to why. Plus, lots of people out there now is unfortunately not really worth a damn, and very rare people it's hard to find between certain things, right? So ultimately it just isn't really a great time in this new age of things. Shit sucks. The only two solutions I can think of is a return to form, which I highly doubt will happen, or just be less scared. Honestly, just be less unapologetic as to what you're doing, because you just don't have to sit here and play the game like everybody else is. Just do your own thing, be based in your own way, and that's just how it is. Again, as long as it's not hurting nobody, it's whatever, right? That's just ultimately how it can go. Because I'm not gonna lie, life should not be this restrictive. It really shouldn't be. Like, things already suck as it is. The last thing you need to have is a restrictive mindset of what you can and can't do, and things of sort like that, and just go to one extreme to another extreme to another extreme. It shouldn't be like that. A perfect balance of things is the best outcome, if we're gonna be honest, right? I'm just rambling at this point. I don't know if anything I said in this video makes sense, but I'm gonna leave it there. So hopefully you did enjoy. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe, hit the bell notification on the way out. Also on socials, and like to donate to the channel, Kofi and Cash App is available as well. And until next, man, boy Jay, signing off. Have a blessed day.